Hi everyone, thanks for being here. My name's Brodie Lancaster. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we're meeting on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations and pay respect to elders past and present. All right, I'm gonna try to answer the question that I think every social media caption writer has been asking over the last year, but I'm not sure I'm ready for it. As they keep asking, I am. But thankfully, I'm not facing it alone, because joining us today on what is kind of a cliched Melbourne day, all the way from New York, is Brittany Spanos. She's a senior writer at Rolling Stone, where she's written about pop music and internet culture since 2015. Her byline has appeared on cover stories about Adele, Cardi B, Harry Styles, recently Al Kylie and Dua Lipa. You can hear her regularly on the Rolling Stone Music Now podcast, and if you're one of the attendees of the Swiftposium over the weekend, you'll have heard her present her keynote there as well. This event and Brittany's visit to Australia was made possible by that conference at University of Melbourne, so we just want to thank the Faculty of Arts at the university for their support. Brittany, welcome to the Wheeler Centre.
Thank you.
Wow, this is like pop star level fandom in the flesh. The Swiftposium wasn't the first time that you've spoken about pop music in an academic context. We presented papers together many years ago, along with Maria Sherman, the critic and author, about One Direction, RIP, at the EMP Pop Conference in Seattle. And you're also essentially the professor of Taylor Swift. Can you tell us all a little bit about the origins of your class and at the Clive Davis School, and also like the intentions behind kind of beginning that?
Yeah, so I was an NYU student for college, and I took a lot of these classes in Clive Davis, which is a school in the fine arts program at NYU that's geared towards students who want to be musicians or want to work in the music industry. And most of the classes in that program are like closed off to people who are actually in that program. I was not in that program, so I ended up taking all of the open courses, and they were all these like half semester, amazing, fun courses on like famous musicians and scenes. So I took one on David Bowie, on punk rock, and like Nirvana and the rise of grunge. Like these were like very formative classes for me, and especially as an aspiring music journalist, I was like, those built a foundation for a lot of what I know. And I always wanted to teach one, and it was in the back of my mind for a long time, where I was like, maybe one day I'll be like an expert in something, or like feel smart enough to talk to a class of kids and do that. And yeah, I kept in touch with the department head, Jason King, who's actually at a different university now. And I pitched him a few artists. It was like Taylor Swift, Janet Jackson, Britney Spears, and Tina Turner. And I was like, those are all artists that if I needed to walk into a classroom tomorrow with little to no preparation, I could talk at length for like 3 hours about something with them. And he loved the Taylor idea. He was like, at the time they didn't have a lot of younger artists that those classes were built around. They now have a Lana class as well that started the semester after my first Taylor class. And thought, there was just so many elements of Taylor that would be really informative for a classroom of students who want to work in the music business. And I agreed. And so that's how it came to be, and it's been super fun.
It's wild to think that there was this idea that, an artist had to have kind of like a long legacy or a decades-old legacy to be worth studying, I imagine, at the time. I remember hearing recently, like, the Spice Girls were only a thing for like 20 months. They like didn't even pass the 2-year mark, but I'm sure that they're like, we consider them like a legacy act in a way that I think some people probably still don't consider Taylor Swift, despite almost 20 years.
Yeah, and I think it's also just like, she's so prolific. Like, I mean, I took the Nirvana class. There's like only a few Nirvana albums that we're really discussing. Like, we're really kind of, it has to be a class that is also about like, Kurt Cobain's life and about 90s culture and about grunge culture. Like there's so much music that Taylor's released. And even when I was working on the syllabus, it was 2021 when I pitched the class, and Fearless TV had come out when I pitched it. Red TV came out after I'd already submitted the syllabus, so then I had to rework that. Then luckily, quiet for most of 2022. Like, Literally that.
And then
like spring semester when I first taught the class, she was nowhere to be found. Like it was
quiet.
like actually like pretty shocking because I was like, the most news about her was about the class. Like I was like, this is kind of crazy.
That's true, yeah.
Where is Taylor? And then she drops Midnights in the Fall. And my second time teaching was spring 2023. And I reworked the syllabus again to like make sure Midnights was on the syllabus. The class semester ended 2 weeks before Eras Tour came. And so I was like, okay, like, I'm so happy that this, like, everything changed after this semester. So I'm not teaching this school year because they kind of like divvy up the classes for all of these. And so I'm actually very thankful to kind of not be having to like rework what I'm teaching the students every 5 minutes.
Well, yeah, I mean, I interviewed you recently for an issue, an edition of The Big Issue that's coming out about Taylor Swift this week. And I had to add stuff right before it went to print because the Grammys happened. And then, this week the news has been kind of filled with talk of like, can a jet get from Japan to the Super Bowl to Australia in time? Like the news kind of like does not stop. It doesn't rest. I remember reading in the NME in like 2015, like just post 1989, I think, after the like media saturation of the Squad kind of moment, Taylor Swift said, I think people might need a break from me. And that thought is kind of gone now. The idea that there has been any kind of oversaturation, the level of exposure is one thing, but there's also like the scale of the creative output that she's been operating at for the last 5 years now is kind of without comparison. What do you kind of chalk that up to?
It just seems like she is really in a creative prime right now that I think is so unique. And I think every artist kind of hopes that they have this sort of, multi-year period where they are super inspired and they are kind of producing a lot of music. And so much of that is like, not only has she released, since 2020, she's released now going to be 4 original albums of new work. And the 3 that we have are pretty excellent. And, I think Folklore and Evermore specifically brought in a lot of new fans. I think they like completely reshaped how some people who maybe were not too super sold on Taylor and her talent and her songwriting may have had a newfound respect or kind of listened to her with new ears. So the original music is really good. Then she has these re-recordings. Fearless and Red were like the best possible ones to put out first because both those albums were like really career making in terms of making her bigger than country music and making her a crossover artist. And those were really good reminders, I think, for people of that talent having been there, of the songwriting and the skill level being so high as a teenager and creating like really massive success with those albums. Like All Too Well, 10 Minute being a number 1 song is pretty remarkable. Like to be able to do that, nearly a decade later. So I think it's just kind of like the volume is massive, but it's also like really good. And so that's kind of helping push that all along.
I will mention, I forgot to say it at the top, we're going to have time for questions at the end in case you're thinking about things and want to ask them to Brittany later on. But it's my turn for a while yet. And as you were saying that, I was thinking about how the Eras Tour era is also like it rewards like that deep kind of encyclopedic like engagement with that earlier work as well. Like to get it, you have to have like either been there or like done your homework since as well. So there's a real kind of savvy, not just the kind of re-recordings, but the level of engagement that fans kind of are encouraged to have is something pretty unique to her as well.
Yeah, and it's just like this like almost constant nostalgia cycle, but not in like, I find it a little bit less sort of, I don't know, almost exploitative than like actual sort of nostalgia cycles that sometimes people do where they're like 90s boat cruise, it's like she's doing this as a means of owning her work. And, it is a project that's kind of coming from this like legal place, this personal place, this kind of betrayal, this like revenge kind of aspect that also colors a lot of her music and is just like a fascinating aspect of Swift totally, but like it's also like informing the new music. So like you can hear elements of the music on Fearless and Red in Folklore. You know, like you can hear her re-examining teenage love stories on an album like that, and very clearly is like thinking about herself and thinking about her past selves while she's writing her music. And Midnights, of course, is like the best example of that, where it's, you know, the midnights from her life, and you could place these songs into different album cycles and different eras. So she's like feeding into it because she herself is being nostalgic for these times, and it's very clear in how she is having so much fun on stage, revisiting these eras and recreating them for everyone, and revisiting the outfits and like the dance moves and like the, you know, the like hand hearts and the, you know, the funky little red bowler hat that she brought back.
Funky?
the funky little hat, you know?
Yeah, the re-recording moment, like it really feels like something happened then in 2020 with both the Scooter Braun moment kind of coalesced those two sides of her persona, I think. Like the kind of young woman, perpetually a young woman with like ringlets and a guitar, who is always the teenage girl who's like never chosen or always kind of done wrong. And that's like such a big mine for her to kind of keep pulling from. But also the other side of it is this adult woman artist who understands her power and influence and kind of like creative ambition, and really appreciates the ability she has to kind of summon her fans and essentially say, I want to overwrite my archive and I need you to press play on these songs instead of these ones. Will you do it for me? And like millions of people are like, yes. In pursuit of like artistic justice, like it all kind of, 2020 feels like a very momentous moment for Taylor, right? Yeah,
that definitely is, I think, sort of what was the turning point. Because even when you think about it, like Lover was an album that I really love Lover, but like it didn't get its moment. It didn't get its moment, but it also wasn't like an immediately beloved album in the way that some of her albums have been. I think it was pretty divisive because the lead singles were like kind of a misdirection for people, I think. Like I think that album is actually like, I return to the album a lot and I think it's like pretty brilliant, but like the singles otherwise do not tell you that the album is going to be like as this like sort of like intimate kind of brilliant love songs from her across the board. But like people just kind of really loathed like Me and You Need to Calm Down in ways that, you know, kind of happened with Look What You Made Me Do, which was also a really divisive single. And again, wasn't the best representation of Reputation, which I think, again, I mean, I'm a fan of all the albums, but like Reputation
I totally
and Lover
agree.
are like albums that like it shocked me that those were the singles chosen, but obviously those singles were like meant to be a statement. But yeah, so, you know, she kind of was still rebuilding a lot of her goodwill post, you know, 1989 overexposure, post the Kim Ye feud, post the 2016 election. Like there was still like a lot of stuff that she was like really trying to rebuild, even though it never stopped her from still being massive. It just kind of was like a little bit of a step backwards that she kind of had to like figure out.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it really did feel like that. Obviously the pandemic kind of like cut a lot of things short, but she went from Reputation of like, I'm not doing any press, you're going to buy this Target magazine of my interview I decided to give, like my snake print photos. And then Lover was when she really embraced kind of promoting an album again, you know. She did so many great live performances, like kind of offered up a lot of herself in live interviews, and it did feel like something kind of like cut short and we like missed out on something else before she, I don't know, went up to Long Pond and braided her hair.
And it's like the weirdest like best career accident thing that sort of like is like being
I'm so grateful.
Like I can't even imagine like what, you know, what would have happened next, you know? Like it's kind of crazy to think about, because I don't know that the album following Lover would have had the same impact if it weren't for the type of like introspection that was happening on Folklore and Evermore. And I don't know that the type of introspection would have happened if she weren't home and like having to, you know, be forced to reflect in the way that many of us were in 2020. And like, it's kind of surreal to think about like how that sort of benefited so much of her career in that time.
Yeah, reflecting, but then also like re-recording all that old stuff. She was kind of in that mindset again. I want to go back a little ways to kind of the very beginning. Like 18 years ago, I realized it's been 18 years. I realized it's been since Taylor kind of first appeared with her debut record. So in other words, I want to talk about country music.
Yeah.
Because along with
boots.
I love the boots. Along with Reputation, Taylor's version, we're waiting for her debut album to be re-recorded, which is from an era I'm very affectionate for, the Tim McGraw, Teardrops on My Guitar, Slam and Screen Door era. What sense do you have of Taylor's relationship now to country music and that community and that kind of, it's almost an industry of its own? You know, we've seen other pop stars step into country and really embrace the aesthetics and the sounds. Madonna 25 years ago, Beyonce like 2 days ago. What do you think of Taylor's kind of like relationship to it now, so far removed and after everything that has kind of transpired in the years since?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, the first part is that I think even when she was more entrenched in country music, even with debut and Fearless, she wasn't like, she was part of that country community. Like she opened for Rascal Flatts, she opened for Tim McGraw, like she was part of it, but she was very quickly kind of aligned herself with pop people. Like her age group and her peers were the Jonas Brothers and Selena Gomez. And like by Fearless, she was spending time with pop artists, with people who, you know, she's at the Grammys performing 15 with Miley. Like it's like kind of, she's already has a foot in both worlds. And that makes sense because she was a teenager and like, you know, she was like the only like teen star in country at that moment. And her teen peers who were as famous as she was, were doing pop music. And also like, you know, kind of, they were, I mean, you know, Miley's like a little country adjacent, but like that was the people that she was spending time with and splitting her time with. And that made sense, sort of just in an age appropriate type of way. But, you know, I think in terms of the songwriting, like it's funny to me because when I listen to like 1989, I hear country sort of Nashvilleism type of like songwriting on there. And I've always thought that that's such a big part of all of her songwriting, where there is that country storytelling aspect of so much of her music that is still happening even when she's not explicitly making country music. You know, I think like All You Had to Do Is Stay is like very kind of like country to me. Even like the narrative style of Style is very country to me. Just kind of that storytelling of like, you know, kind of like doing that twist. I mean, she talks about it in the Long Pond Sessions about folklore, how the last great American dynasty has that like country twist in it of like, and then it's me.
Twist, yeah.
So I think it's always been in her music.
It's very your song.
Yes.
Our song.
Yeah.
Our song.
And like, there's a lot of that in her love songs. Or Cornelia Street is such a country song. Like all of these elements of the way that stories are told in her music really hits because she's doing country tropes with it. Like pop music is very often just like that verse, chorus, verse kind of like emotions, and country music is actions, and like all of her music is very much actions. And because country and singer-songwriter styles are so interconnected and so much about kind of that narrative and that story, and like we are moving from place to place and from like storyline to storyline, and like that's sort of, she's a very kind of literal songwriter in that way. So I think her relationship with country has never really left. I think she's just kind of obviously explored the different genres and added some synths and some Jack Antonoffs and kind of done with that what she wanted to.
Let's get Jack to Nashville is what I'm saying. I would love to see her kind of return to that, go full like Nobody No Crime album length.
Yeah.
When she does the re-recording, maybe. She seems to kind of pair the re-recordings with the new music that she's working on, right?
Yeah, and I think like even just like hearing new country music from her, I mean new old country music from her in terms of the vault recordings was like so delightful. Like I love the Red TV vault recordings. Like I Bet You Think About Me is such a great song. I'm like, how could you not put this on the album when it was, but it was very clearly almost too country for that album. But yeah, I mean, just like hearing those little country moments from her, and even, she wrote like Babe and, Better Man for she originally wrote them and then they ended up going to different artists. Like those songs came out when she was already, well into pop with 1989. So that was a little bit always there.
Maybe we've dug ourselves a hole by always talking about her crossover into pop, and we need to be like, no, you can do both. Please do both. It is notable for me that kind of similarly to the like pairing of the old and new records is that the next ones we'll get from Taylor are the re-recording of, I assume, of, the I've destroyed my public image but found a new person who loves me album. Yeah. And then... or not, and then, sorry, I shouldn't speak as if I have any knowledge of when Reputation Taylor's version is coming out. I don't want to give that impression because I don't. But, and next on my list, non-linear, is the album, presumably, that she's just announced about the breakup of that relationship. And, yeah, eventually some return to that early blueprint of herself as an artist. And the more I thought about that, I realized they're kind of like... almost like her three key personas in a way, like kind of scorched earth, woman who needs to have the last word, and always using music as the last word. She doesn't use media or kind of like live performance in that way, like in the same way that, I'm sorry to invoke them in this forum, but like the Kardashians use their TV show as their like definitive statement on anything. And then the third persona kind of is like famous person having like a uniquely celebrity experience who is like that no normal person can kind of relate to. And I'm curious to know from where you're sitting, if you could kind of predict or like anticipate or think about like what she might be kind of writing about this moment for the next record, maybe in the similar way that like Reputation kind of captured that like post Kimye fallout of like the public sentiment kind of turning against her. Like, what do you think like the theme might be from like the last two kind of impossible to predict enormous volcanic years of her career from our self-mythologizing queen?
I mean, this would be the best time for her to return to country. I feel like being the kind of on the road type of songs, like dating the football player, like that, those are country songs. Like,
yeah, girl.
That is like, I mean, I think that could be kind of a fun way for her to be like, actually, I'm going to make a country album now, like that. I'm like,
I want to watch Travis Kelce listen to country music also.
So, I mean, I think that could happen. I mean, I think, she's always done very well with like both the love songs and more recently with writing songs from different perspectives. Like it could really go anywhere. I mean, we can get another kind of like, folklore evermore type of like, she's doing narratives inspired by like, literature and like, made up characters that she has in her head, or we can get like a kind of another type of like lover moment or a kind of lover Reputation fusion moment of like her really kind of focusing on sort of these like love songs, presumably. I mean, it seems like it's going well between them, like, like love songs about them with kind of like the, the like talking her shit type of like, stop talking about my private jet, like type of stuff.
I wish she'd sing about the jet.
Oh my God.
I'm like, be a celebrity.
Yeah. I mean, she's, she could very much do that type of like, real kind of like haughty type of like celebrity, like, like I'm a boss type of songs. Like she's done them and she's like had kind of teases of that, but she could just lean into that if she wanted to,
We've already seen that things are not set in stone because famously, like very early in her career, you and I talked about this recently, where she kind of said, you're never going to see me be the kind of like child star who grows up and like falls out of a cab drunk. Like you're never going to see me like drinking publicly and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
I saw her slamming a beer on a Jumbotron a day ago. I'm like, things can change.
Yeah, she was holding like
encourage
3
you to
drinks at the marshmallow after party for the Super Bowl, like things happen. Sometimes,
Sometimes stuff happens. She'll go from writing like fantasy stories about like a mad woman on a beach in like a stately home to like a football coach.
Yeah.
It's like, what's his life like? I'm going to write 3 verses. And at the end, it's me. I'm the coach. Even like this act of like hypothesizing, like, what's the new album going to be? What are the themes? Where is she at? We know her. So like, let's excavate and kind of like put the pieces together. Like there are so few artists who not just kind of warrant that level of like thinking, puzzle piecing, like red stringing, but who kind of actively encourage it in like theorizing from the media and from fans and from like casual observers. When do you think Taylor has kind of gotten that really right in like leaving clues and then kind of rewarding fans with something at the end? And when do you think maybe it's kind of backfired or not been as successful?
I think I always really loved the liner notes that she did for her early albums, like when, you know, obviously physical media was sort of like the priority of it, you know, kind of putting the little messages and the capitalizations and like the, like, you know, the quotes and everything. Also, like, I've always been really partial to the lyrics she would write on her arm during the Speak Now tour. I love those. And I think that kind of like, that hinting at her influences and hinting at kind of like the little peeks at what the songs are about, kind of offering that, like, you know, like putting like maple latte on like All Too Well, capitalizing the words for that, like that kind of stuff I've always really loved. And I think in the backfiring is that there's too many. Like, I think it's like, it's kind of like my limit. And it's just like a more of a personal thing. Like, it's my limit as like a Swiftie where I'm like, I cannot be decoding constantly. Like, it's like genuinely exhausting. And like, sometimes I'll get videos on TikTok constantly of people being like, on this date because of this clock and this color that she's wearing. And I'm like, I'm tired.
It was just a nice dress at an award show.
I'm like, what if we just enjoyed it?
Yeah.
Like, and I think it's like, and it really frustrates me with like a lot of the videos where it's like almost too many Easter eggs. And I'm like, I have to opt out. Like, it's like, that part is the thing.
She wants to make a feature film. Imagine.
Oh, God, I know. If there's Easter eggs in the film, I'm not even going. Like, it's like, it'll be my limit.
It's going to have to be, cinemas are going to have lights on so everyone can be jotting down their notes.
It's funny, and it's to a point. Like, it's kind of like parts of it are like kind of fun, but, you know, like, I think like everyone in her life kind of changing their profile picture to like black and white. Loved that. That's a fun Easter egg.
I didn't know that happened.
So that happened like 2 weeks ago, and it was like literally like all the Kelseys did it, like Gigi Hadid, like a bunch of people.
The family's doing it too.
She had like Kylie and Jason doing it.
Not Jason. He's got a podcast to me.
Yeah. And so, you know, like that part, I love that part. I was like, ooh, something's coming. Like, I was like, ooh, they all changed their picture. When she gonna change her picture? She changed it the day of the Grammys. Like that, love that. Great. I'm like, if I have to read one more damn clock and figure out what day.
Enough clocks.
No more clock. I'm like, we need to ban the clocks. Like, if I hear a ticking of a clock, it's going full like.
What's that?
Edgar Allan Poe,
that
you know?
video art. Yes, it's very The Raven. What's that like video artist installation where he's taken like every second of every day from a film and put it together, and it's a 24-hour installation.
Oh yes,
It's very that maybe she went to a gallery and she got inspired by the clocks.
I think it's just like. It's fun to a point. I think like I worry about it getting too homeworky to the point where like, what if she doesn't want to continue doing that at one point, and then people are still there like with like red string putting things together, and I think it takes away some of the enjoyment a little bit. Like it's just kind of like I just want the music. Like I don't want to like piece things together. Like I just want to listen to the songs. Maybe I'll have some like behind my brain theories about them, but like. For the most part, my favorite thing about Taylor Swift songs is that I place them on my own life. Like, I'm also a Leo, so I'm like this is clearly about my experience. But like, that's like, I mean, I think that's just like what the enjoyment of it is.
Yeah, I think her kind of ubiquity as well, and like the impact she has had on all areas of culture, means that level of kind of hypothesizing and like clue conspiring, you could say conspiracy theory, is kind of seeping into like all artists as well, even those who don't subscribe to it in the way that she did early on, you know?
Yeah, I mean, even like like Beyonce was kind of doing a little bit more like Easter eggy type of things with like the country album.
Oh my God.
You know, like kind of like showing up in the cowboy hat at
Soft
the Grammys.
launching a
yeah,
cowboy
she was
hat.
like, yeah, little soft launches here and there.
Yeah.
Which I love. You know, like I think there's like really fun ways to do it. You know, I think like kind of really cool ways, but yeah, it seems like it's becoming such a bigger thing, like how people are thinking about like kind of planting little seeds, because it's easy marketing, like, right? Like it's like if you like have these little hints somewhere, and your fans are, you know, kind of vast in a way where they are willing to piece that together, then it works really effectively.
I want to talk a little bit about the moment at the Grammys last week where Taylor took her first acceptance speech as an opportunity to announce the upcoming record. You know, some people who were in the room tweeted or posted things or made statements as kind of inferring that like the moment for everyone to come after her was kind of gone after that, or like the air was kind of sucked out of the room because like the biggest megastar in the room had kind of taken a little more attention for herself. And I was reading the culture journalist Anne Helen Peterson in her recent newsletter. She wrote a piece about Taylor Swift and what she called the good girl trap. And she said, sometimes when you keep winning awards, but also in your career, it doesn't matter who you are or how hard you worked for those achievements, people are going to find it harder to root for you. It's when domination turns into oversaturation, when honest missteps become weaponized, when the interpersonal comes to feel emblematic, when every move becomes overdetermined. And this is something that we've heard kind of nonstop for the last 10 plus years, I think, of Taylor Swift discourse. Do you remember kind of the moment that sentiment kind of arrived for you, or when you first started noticing it? And do you have a sense kind of why it's never left?
Yeah, I think like probably the height of it was 1989. Like I feel like it was so much her being everywhere and having like constant hit songs, like being surrounded by the most famous people in the world who are like, you know, part of the squad, or coming out to like be on stage with her at her shows. Like she's bringing out like Chris Rock, and like Kobe Bryant came out at a show, and like all these people were just like being sort of like brought out and kind of in sort of her sphere. Obviously like there was like the very kind of dramatic like Kanye and like Taylor reconciliation, like adding on to, you know, all these things. And of course, even prior to that, there's like the constantly shocked face of the winning awards, which was made fun of a lot. And they even did like an SNL sketch about it. So, I mean, there's like all of those things. I think it's kind of where that country and pop part sort of doesn't work always as well, because so much of that to me, of like a lot of her kind of personality and self-marketing, reminds me of kind of Nashville type of culture. Which is that modesty, that being very like, you know, genuinely surprised at sort of like all your blessings. And a lot of it comes from like sort of that Southern Christianity type of stuff of being like a sort of down home country star. But, you know, that's sort of what Taylor as this like teenage prodigy was emulating, and so much of like what that presentation had to be. Mixed with that type of like community that comes with country music, like that, all that's pretty normalized. So I think that's kind of where it falters in pop music, where like trying to translate some of that into a pop persona falls flat, because that's not the same thing we want out of our pop stars.
Yeah. But I'm not even, as you're saying that, I'm realizing I've never thought of it through the lens of like genre, because we have discussions, or we have thoughts about Taylor as this kind of like powerful figure in terms of like her whiteness, her beauty, her talent, her thinness, her power, etc. But she's also a young woman who, you know, to be shocked at her success feels falsely immodest, but to be confident and like, yes, I deserve to win, also would not go down well.
Yeah. I mean, even like in sort of the reactions to her reaction to winning, like it was still like there was like that shock, but also like she was clearly very excited and like kind of reacting, you know, like a pop star who's been winning everything over the last couple of years does. And so even that sort of got backlash and hate. Like, you know, like the idea that she didn't like immediately like hug Celine or something, or like, you know, it's like stuff that's kind of getting picked on, that like if it were someone else, like if someone else had walked up there and just kind of like, you know, just was overwhelmed by the moment and didn't acknowledge everyone. Like it's the kind of becomes a bigger thing because there's all this kind of loaded divisiveness built into Taylor.
Yeah, absolutely. I had this note written down that I realize isn't a question, but it is a thought that maybe we can talk about.
Yeah.
And it's the image of Taylor Swift as a worker, as like someone who works at her craft, but also works at her image and, you know, reads everything about her, you assume, listens to everything, she's lurking in your posts, like she might see it no matter what you say. She kind of wears her effort like it's a t-shirt or a billboard or something. And being a try-hard, as we call them in Australia, is the thing about her that I love the most, that is the most real to me, the most relatable to me. But then I also get trapped in that cycle of like, it's not a pop star's job to be relatable. You cannot relate to her. Your experiences are not the same. But it's like a trap that no one can win. But I also really love that kind of depiction of her as like someone who like cares deeply and tries very hard and isn't cool about it or chill about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very like, I mean, because I watch Glee a lot, like I compare her a lot to Rachel Berry in class.
I forget that you were a Glee.
We don't have to label it on stage.
Sorry. That you watched the television show Glee.
That I was a viewer of Glee. I mean, she is so Rachel Berry coded in that, where it's like, there is that naked ambition. She wanted to be successful. She like, you know, she wanted to be a famous pop star. Like she wanted to be a successful country singer. She wanted to be like Tim McGraw. She wanted to be like Faith Hill. She wanted to be like the Chicks. Like she wanted to be big and she wanted to be signed to a label. You know, when she went to pop, she wanted to be the best at pop. Like she worked with Max Martin. She talks about how it was like going to school. You know, it was like kind of her college courses were to work with the best there is in pop music and pop writing. You know, she wanted to be bigger. Like she wants to play stadiums. You know, it's not like she doesn't want these things. And it would be ridiculous to act like any of our pop stars do not want these things. But we like to assume that they do. Like it's like they can't be humble, but they need to be humble. You know, like they need to be like genuinely not like showing in an obvious way that this is what they wanted forever. You know, like even thinking about like my Nirvana class from when I took my little like Clive Davis course in college, like so much of that we talked about the fact that there was this image projected onto Kurt Cobain that like he didn't want this, that he was like he very much like was overwhelmed by the fame, and I mean he was overwhelmed by the fame, but like he didn't want it at all, and that it was a thing that he but it was a persona that he was playing. Like all of his journals and all of his thing was like, we love ABBA and we want to be a big group and I want to be the biggest rock star in the world. And like his heroes were like Kiss and like all these like things that would be seen as like kind of basic to 90s kind of alt rock, you know, fans. And so we want this constant idea of like this martyrdom of celebrity. And Taylor never did that. Like she never pretended to not want it. She was very much like this, like, you know, kind of like straight A student type of pop star where it's like she wants to be top of the class and she wants to win the awards. She cares deeply about institutions like the Grammys. She cares deeply about the success of the albums and the songs. Like if she didn't, she wouldn't put out like 5 versions of a vinyl record, you know, like she wouldn't put out like remix on remix of the song. She cares about it. Like, and that's, and everyone does. Like no one, and we shouldn't pretend like celebrities don't. So I think because she never hid that, it's always been sort of a complicated relationship that people have had with her being sort of business minded and talking about it in the way that we don't want pop stars, especially women, to talk about it.
I think we also have this idea that the bigger a celebrity gets, whatever field they work in, you know, we think of like A-list actors from an older generation. We're talking about Leonardo DiCaprio backstage, but like he, you know, they rarely grant interviews. They allow very little access into their personal lives. You can talk about them, but they don't enter into the dialogue, whereas she is very much like, I'm a part of this conversation and I'm going to like correct the record at every opportunity as well. Yeah. She's very like, she does very much treat it like a business, and she is very,
she's very much her own sort of like marketing agency. She's always been good at that. And it comes from that very like millennial sensibility of self-promotion. Like she was on MySpace early in her career. She was interacting with her fans. She was building her fan base like on MySpace and promoting her music on there and interacting with people, adding them to her top 8, like doing all
the Christmas tree farm, HTML coding. Yeah.
And, you know, she was interacting with it, and then she's used social media in that way constantly. You know, she's very much like, she's paying attention, and she's like genuinely kind of like interacting with it because she wants to know and she wants to kind of like be part of it.
I really want your thoughts on feelings, responses to Tortured Poets Department and what we have seen so far, which includes the cover art.
Yeah.
Which I described as Tumblr cover art.
Yes.
It feels like my friend is a photographer, has a camera, and needed to take some photos for their portfolio.
She's such a millennial. Like, it's so like, it's like she's such a peak millennial. Like, she's like the peak millennial to me.
Yes, me too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
can't talk about her manicures. I can't. The square tip.
We can't get into that.
The square tip.
That's a whole other hour conversation. But it's very Tumblr. Even the title is very Tumblr poet type of like title, which I love.
Her Veins of Pitch Black Ink being a song title.
Yeah, I mean all the song titles. It's just like I'm waiting.
Sorry,
for
that
it.
was her letter that she posted with it.
Like,
sorry.
I know it's going to be an album that will likely very much devastate me.
Oh, it's going to be great.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I guess like my initial reaction was stressed because I thought I was so prepared for us working for the Gram. You know, it's like, this is also my job. Like, I'm like, I have to cover this, you know? And for her to like drop an album announcement like the day before I went on vacation, I was like, not this. Like,
yeah.
I was like, guess I'll deal with this in like April. But yeah, because I was so emotionally prepared for Rep TV announcement that night. So it was stressing me out. And I thought it was fake at first. I was like, there's no way that's like a real album that she's announcing right now.
I know.
There's no way
too.
she wrote another album.
Me too.
Yeah, I was like, is this like a little joke? She's just having a little like, she's a little wine drunk at the Grammys and made a little joke.
She's made so many albums she can't keep track.
But yeah, I think I was very genuinely surprised by it because especially like she kind of, the way that she dropped "You Were Losing Me," which I think is one of my favorite songs that by her that I love that song. It's such a devastating breakup song and felt so much like the statement on the relationship with Joe in a lot of ways because it sort of was so quietly released and then was not in streaming. Like she like put it out on the physical deluxe version of Midnights that was only released at the MetLife Stadium shows in New York. And then, so like the only versions that existed online for months were like YouTube rips that I was like blowing up, like hit platinum on
YouTube to mp3.com.
Yeah,
Paste the link.
I wasn't even doing that. Like I was like literally like, I was like, I want to listen to You're Losing Me like 5 times. Let me just like throw on YouTube, you know? Because I couldn't put it on I was like, I can't put this on my phone. This would be a horrible act of anti-self-care. And like, it was just, she like quietly released it on streaming. Like it is such a devastating breakup song that's so clearly about this relationship that it almost felt like that was the statement on it. And to make an album title that is so explicitly a reference to Joe and his group chat with Paul Mescal and who's it, Andrew Scott, the Tortured Man's Club. To then have like a song called
that felt really bold.
I screamed. I sounded psychotic in like several group chats because I was like, the group chat that he has, and they were all like, "What are you talking about?"
She and Phoebe Bridgers are talking so much shit. You just know.
Yeah. I'm surprised Phoebe's not on the album, to be honest, with that title. But yeah, it's like So Long London being a track, Florida, which is like, she played a show in Florida like the day that the breakup was announced, I think.
Florida,
like,
3 exclamation marks.
Yeah, like all that. I'm like, this is like crazy. Like this is like so like, yeah, I was like, this is way more sort of explicit in a response than I actually anticipated that she would have. in that way. So I'm looking forward to whatever drama unfolds.
A song title that's a quote from The Little Mermaid. Wild.
Yes.
But I also feel like I'm sensing some country seeping in. Maybe I'm just manifesting and delusional. Maybe I'm delusional, maybe I'm manifesting. Let's see. But like Fresh Out the Slammer. Fresh Out the Slammer.
I can't talk about that title.
Guilty as Sin ? Who's Afraid of Little Old Me? Also ? She's really playing with punctuation on this record. I Can Fix Him (No Really I Can). And The Smallest Man Who Ever Lived, which I feel like is going to be...
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you said it. Wild.
Yeah.
All right. We're going to open up to questions. If you have questions, you just need to put your hands up. The ushers will come around and hand you a mic. While we're getting the first couple lined up, Brittany, we've talked about Taylor. We haven't really talked about you and your work, so I'm going to merge them together.
Yeah.
Because, you know, when writing like a really long form feature profile on an artist, like you do so often, you kind of have to find like your hypothesis or your thesis statement on them in this moment, their career, why they're on the cover kind of thing. Hypothetically, if your next cover were to be about Taylor Swift at this moment releasing this record, what would your kind of thesis statement on her be? Like the conversation among all of the noise and volume of chat around her, what is the thing we're kind of, the conversation we're not having about her that you really want to have?
Ooh, not having about her. I mean, I think I just like really want to get into the volume of stuff. Like, I think that is like the craziest part to me, where it's like, I want to like have that discussion with her of like how and why, like what is motivating her? Because there's something that's like really kind of like, you know, chasing her creatively, that she's like trying to hit this moment. Because it's one thing to, you know, be constantly writing, as many artists do, but it's another thing to like really have that sort of like that urge to like write, and then also put it out consistently into the world on top of everything else that's happening. I mean, she also clearly like wrote a movie and like is doing like, you know, it's like all these other things that she's working on. It just seems like there's like something else kind of like really motivating her to like really push deeper into this prolific period. And I'm kind of curious, like that motivation that goes beyond just, you know, that kind of clear kind of nostalgia and all this other stuff. Like the sort of like the why of it is still something I don't really totally understand.
I want to see her Google Calendar when you get that interview.
Yeah, let's get the full agenda.
I want to know how she plans her days.
Yeah.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi. Thanks so much for doing this, Brodie and Brittany. I've been following your work for so long, since you both used to write for Rookie Mag, and it's so awesome to see you like in person today. And Brittany, I really loved your episodes on Pop Pantheon. I've listened to you on Rolling Stone as well, but I loved your episodes where you talked about One Direction and Destiny's Child. And so my question is, do you think Taylor has reached tier 1 yet? So for reference, tier 1 is where they put pop stars like Madonna and like Michael Jackson, and like I think Beyonce's technically, they ranked her as a tier 1.
Yeah.
Do you feel that Taylor is at that level yet, or do you think it's still too early to say?
How many tiers are there?
Oh, I think it's kind of like a triangle.
Yeah.
For reference, I'm pretty sure Fifth Harmony is tier 5.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yes, I think she's absolutely in tier 1. I think this tour, if there was any doubts of her being in tier 1, this tour and the past year has absolutely solidified her. I think this is like a moment in that we will look back on. Like, this is a moment in music history that like will continue to be sort of marked as like a major moment, in the same way that we talk about like Beyonce dropping self-titled, like you know, talking about like Thriller, like talking about like, you know, Beatlemania. Like, we're going to be talking about it in that context, because it's really, I mean, the fervor around it, the way that people have really congregated around, just like physically around the shows, the you know, the kind of like ticket sort of fiascos, and also just like fever to get it. Like, it's just like all of that is so big. And it will be hard to not look at this as like a historic moment in music. I would have said, I feel like she hit tier 1 prior to this, but I do think this was a very sort of solidifying tier 1 moment.
I'm getting the sense, I haven't listened to this podcast, but I'm getting the sense it's like a who and a them kind of distinction.
Yeah, it's like kind of assessing an artist's career and kind of figuring out kind of where they like stand in sort of that.
There's also like the record breaking element of it too. Like you got to win 4 Album of the Year Grammys to even get close to her now in terms of like industry kind of status.
Yeah, I think like I would say probably like Folklore Evermore, which is still again like what I see as the turning point for this, was the tier 1 solidifying thing. Because she's kind of like teetering for a little bit. 1989 like put her there, but then like there's so many like weird things and like people not really agreeing on Reputation, Lover, and all that music. But like I think the tour really put her smack dab in that.
Do you ever think about what would have happened if Kim Kardashian had never posted that Snapchat? What would have happened to Taylor Swift's career?
I don't know.
We wouldn't have had Reputation.
Because Reputation slaps. Like, I don't know.
Agreed. Yeah. But we wouldn't have had...
I wouldn't change a thing.
We wouldn't have had the Ed Sheeran on it or the Snakes. I kind of like... I think the Snakes is like the chicest thing she does on the tour.
Yeah, I thought that was a great... I thought the aesthetic change... Like, she needed something like a little like, you know, that wasn't like... That being the darkest possible
it was her, like,
controversy.
Imaginary cigarette moment.
Yeah. Like a leaked Snapchat that's just like a conversation.
I remember where I was.
Best possible scenario for a pop star.
I was.
Yeah.
I tweeted that it was my generation's moon landing. There's another hand somewhere there.
Just 2 questions about the eras in general. So as a teacher, which is the one that you enjoy teaching the most? But also just wondering if you think that the whole concept of the eras has been sort of artificially grafted on a career that actually hasn't had such neat divisions across albums, and is that something that might be artistically defeating going forward?
Yeah, so to that one, I actually was already like the sort of like eras lingo and fandom. I actually have always kind of like not loved that.
Same.
And I think it's become such a bigger thing, and prior to Taylor too. Like obviously this is like a thing that word and that kind of like fandom language has existed for you know, I guess like probably the last decade. This idea of like a pop star constantly having to kill off the last character and like redo everything. Like there was only a few pop stars who were doing that, and it was just kind of like, you know, it's like Gaga was doing it because that's like such a Bowie Madonna thing that she was kind of putting on. But it's like I don't know. I think like having to do that sort of like showiness of changing into characters is something that I don't find necessary. And what I always loved about Taylor is that there wasn't that character to her. Like she was always Taylor Swift. She was just changing her sound to kind of match where she was at musically and what she was going through. So I guess like in the way that she's using it, it kind of morphs the word a little bit to just sort of be like an album is sort of like marking a period in time, and has sort of like completely taken over the language. I don't really know what it will mean for the future for her. I'm hoping that I'm hoping that we just kind of kill off that entire idea of like, you know, everyone has to dye their hair before a new album, and like everyone has to like completely change their entire look, and like, you know, like I think that takes away creatively from anything where it's like you should just be creating because this moves you and excites you and like, you know, is fun, instead of feeling like you need to like create this character, which I don't feel like Taylor has totally done outside of Reputation.
She's also been such a great like sound over the last few years that it's like you don't have to go try something completely different. Although I would love her to work with Mark Ronson.
And it's very much kind of that sort of like a marketing tool for the re-recorders, where she is sort of leading up to this. You are going to have me revisiting, you know, Red, and so I am creating this kind of persona out of Red that otherwise was not a persona. It was just me as a millennial in 2012 wearing outfits that 2012 millennials were wearing.
I thought Polaroids were like very cool, and so that's the album cover.
Yeah.
And your favorite, I think,
shorts.
was the first question.
Yeah. My favorite.
Or your favorite to teach.
My favorite to teach. They're all really fun because each class is kind of unique. Like they all kind of have different angles to them. I think the one that I ended up really loving teaching is actually the Reputation class, because I did not realize prior to teaching it how little like Gen Z, their relationship with Kanye is different than like millennial relationship to Kanye. And so I kind of have to give this big context to him in the class where I have to like explain why it was a big deal.
Mattered.
Yeah, to people who are, you know, now in their early 20s, he's been a MAGA loser and like a real like shitty guy for most of their formative years.
Yeah.
But for people like us and Taylor, like that College Dropout was the first album she bought. He was like, considered a genius and considered the coolest person. And so to kind of contextualize
his album eras, like he kind of defined that concept of matching a look to a sound. And
especially for like a male artist, like it was very much like he was everything to a lot of people. And so, and also like really forward thinking politically and like, controversial, but he was saying like, things that were actually kind of true and
his outbursts
smart.
were good for a time.
So to kind of contextualize that is really fascinating because it helps kind of set up sort of the way that they were weaving together, why their relationship has been so formative to both of them and almost kind of like kind of career trajectory changing for both of them. And I found that really fun to dig into because I love being able to give a little mini history lesson on another artist within this class to kind of make sense of pop culture in the 2000s.
Oh, that would be so juicy.
Hi. So I love Taylor, as most of us probably do. And I feel like her work has given us a lot, emotionally, culturally, economically. As a woman, she's really, really inspirational to my generation. But I often find myself having to legitimize her place and my love of her work. People question that a lot. And I guess my question is, how do you kind of come up against having to legitimize loving a pop star? That's my question. I hope you can kind of interpret that. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think like Brodie and I are such like boy band fans, so we dealt with that a lot. It's covering One Direction when we were covering One Direction, and I think in terms of Taylor, I always get a lot of comments because I'm black and like, it's like, that's a white art, like that's like a white people type of artist. Like that's like, it's like always stuff like that. It's very fascinating because I don't know, like I think the reason why I love covering music and why I cover music and why music means so much to me is we can't really like help the way that we listen to things and what we connect with. We connect with all these things because they are sparking something inside of us that we don't anticipate or didn't realize we needed and all of that. So I don't know. I think it can always be a complicated answer to sort of, make sense of it. But I think also remembering that you don't have to legitimize to anyone why you like what you like kind of helps you answer it in that way where it's like, I've been asked a million times, and I'm like, well, I just like her music. Like her music means something to me. It kind of sparks this kind of like emotional response in me. I also think that her songwriting is quite brilliant. I think I always am. That's kind of the thing that I always bring up to people, where it's just kind of like, here's why I love these songs. Like why these songs kind of connect with me and other people. People are always like, she writes to me breakup songs. Like everyone writes a breakup song.
Yeah.
I can't complain about that.
Yeah.
Like it's like a weird, non-complaint. So
yeah,
I think just remembering at the end of the day, like there's no need to explain yourself for what you like.
Yeah.
Kind of helps you answer it. Cause then you're like, who are you to tell me?
Yeah.
That I can't like Taylor Swift.
Yeah. Getting that kind of like leeway in our careers to like think and write and speak critically about like fandom culture as well, I feel like gave us like a shortcut around it because we could be like, we're really intellectualizing the experience of being a fan when really like, I just want to look at Harry Styles as much as anyone else.
Yeah, I don't know. Those songs are fun.
I'm allowed to still think he's cute and the songs are fun.
Yeah, what am I supposed to do? Not smile and Best Song Ever comes on? Like,
can't.
Hi. I'm wondering, because I absolutely agree with you, Brittany, that Evermore and Folklore were pivotal in bringing so much more of a fan base to Taylor Swift. From a musical and a marketing perspective, what elements of the album do you think brought that fan base in?
I think it was working with someone new, working with Aaron Dessner. I think and I mean, this part is kind of like the weird part to me, and kind of always, like, it doesn't make me feel icky about it, but it's kind of just like, it's like it's in the same way like where Ryan Adams doing the 1989 like cover album was like how you know like Pitchfork hadn't reviewed her music before until like the Ryan Adams like 1989 thing. You know, it's kind of like working with the National, where I think there's a lot of people who like really kind of love that style of rock music, who were like, oh, she's working with Aaron Dessner, that's a new collaborator, that's like a very like weird offbeat choice for Taylor Swift to work with. I think that kind of brought that in, and I think, you know, her last 3 albums prior to this, I mean, I guess 4 if you count Red to that, but Red was like half super bombastic pop and half sort of like, you know, guitar driven, you know, acoustic type of music. But like, you know, 1989, Reputation, Lover were like these like really in your face pop albums, like super, super synthy, like there's like trap drum beats on Reputation, and like Lover is like just like this explosion of color on everything, and it's just like you know, the videos were like super crazy, like it was like very in your face type of like over the top pop dramatics. And I think like Folklore coming out and being sort of like surprised, both of them being like surprise drops, like announcing 12 hours before, no massive rollout, which is unusual for Taylor, working with an like a kind of, you know, left field producer and writer and co-writer for her, and then making music that's way more pared down than she had been making in years. I think it was all kind of like a perfect storm of like people listening. And also, again, like people are just like home, and, you know, I think it was kind of, you know, it was like perfectly sad, reflective music for that moment.
It really met the moment.
Yeah. Like it was really like someone who kind of was just responding to what was going on around her, and doing a lot of the same things that we all were doing, which was just like thinking about our lives or immersing ourselves in stories and kind of turning that into art. But yeah, I think everyone sort of had different reasons why they kind of were pulled to it, but I think that's sort of like all the big stuff that got new listeners.
The rollout too, like what you were saying before about the singles for Lover and Reputation, like, to put it kindly, like no one got a chance to be kind of like sick of her by the time the album came out. It was just a whole record. You didn't know what it was, so you gave it a shot. And I think that's something that she hasn't had the benefit of with the traditional rollout, is you're less willing to give it a shot if you're already like someone who feels very overexposed, as she always is going to be, because she is the monoculture.
Yeah, she has very much used on her pop albums the lead single as that statement. Like Shake It Off is like the, you know, stop talking about my dating life statement. But then like the rest of the album is like so different lyrically from that, you know?
Yeah.
And Look What You Made Me Do is like the you wanted the Kimye statement. And the rest of the album is like a love story. You know, it's like kind of like these like, you know, they just sort of feel very like I don't know, trying to misdirect you. But yeah, I think doing no rollout for someone who becomes so divisive and so overexposed easily has been like the best thing for her. So I'm curious if we're gonna get a single ahead of Tortured Poets. I don't know. Like Midnights, I was kind of surprised that there was like a rollout but no single.
Yeah.
But I think it kind of benefits her more if we just listen to the album as an album.
No more clocks.
Yeah, no more
clocks. Enough clocks.
No more clocks.
That's our time. This went so quickly. I hope that if anyone is in the early stage of their Taylor week, that this was a nice primer. If you are not going to be at the G this weekend, that this was at least scratch some itch of like being around fellow fans. Please join me in thanking Brittany.
And thank you, Brodie.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.